What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And the New York Giants, what's going on with their salary cap space now that Darren Waller has made his retirement official? We know for a while the Giants were very, very thin on salary cap space, like dangerously close to being over the salary cap just a couple of weeks ago. But with the Darren Waller retirement and that extra $11.6 million that got influx into their salary cap space subsequently due to the retirement, where do the Giants stand? Are they cap healthy? What is their long-term salary cap health looking like as well? We kind of want to go ahead, discuss that, dive into it, and what it means for the Giants as they enter this 2024 season, and maybe even looking ahead to next offseason or even further down the line. How are the Giants looking in their finances? That's what we're going to dive into in today's episode. But before we do so, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. Listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about where the Giants stand with their salary cap health?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And listen, the Giants' salary cap health, if there's anything we can give Joe Schoen a round of applause for, it's, correcting a lot of the issues that Dave Gettleman kind of put upon us. And, to say it very lightly, Dave Gettleman screwed Joe Schoen and whoever was going to be the GM in the future because he was trying to save his own butt. Dave Gettleman ends up getting peacefully released into retirement when he should have been fired for the malpractice that was Patrick Omame and the malpractice that was majority of the bad contracts and draft picks he utilized, the graveyard of mid-round selections. I mean, we can go on and on about him. Honestly, I'd rather prefer to keep his name off our podcast, but looking at what Joe Schoen has done to rid ourselves of some bad deals from the past and clear dead money, the only real contract that could pose a problem long-term is Daniel Jones. Depending on what happens with him. But if he struggles this year and they move on, you have the out in the contract. That's the reason they built the out in this contract to begin with. They were never going to be able to get that first, that quarterback this past draft, even if Jones didn't play. So despite the fact he didn't play, they still were just good enough to be out of range. So it wouldn't have mattered anyway, really. The Giants didn't want to go and take too much of a risk trying to get a QB4 in the draft, like a JJ McCarthy or a Michael Penix. They wanted to go in the direction of if we're not going to get the quarterback we want, let's go get the playmaker that we want. They ended up getting Malik Neighbors, who obviously is a superstar, but the Giants' cap health is really, really good. And now the most important thing to remember is they have a couple of guys on big contracts. Dexter Lawrence, of course you have Andrew Thomas, and of course Brian Burns. You have Bobby O'Carroll. He's only making $10 million a year for a player of that magnitude. I think is a really, really solid contract. So you really have three guys making big money right now, aside from Daniel Jones. And the best thing apart those is most of them have not been touched yet in terms of restructures. They haven't restructured basically anyone's contract. So what you see is what you have when it comes to the Giants and their contracts. They can still open up a ton of cap space by restructuring that of Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas. I think they restructured maybe Dexter Lawrence slightly, but it wasn't the full amount. So you still have a lot of money to work with here, which is really, really good. Long term, right now, the Giants have $11.7 million. We asked ourselves a couple of days ago, should they spend any of that money on a veteran cornerback? Well, they went and got Trey Herndon, who is a veteran minimum cornerback, and he's going to offer a little bit of depth and experience in the slot and out wide, but he's not a Stephon Gilmore. He's not one of these more proven commodities that's going to come in and actually offer you a starting level player. Trey Herndon's probably a backup, more of a competitive guy, camp body, someone they can cut and not really lose much. So, just taking up a roster spot, to be very honest. I think they waived Gary Brightwell. His money goes. They replaced with Trey Herndon on a veteran minimum deal. So kind of offset the financial, compensation there. But looking at the Giants in 2025, they have $22.2 million in team cap space. You can add an additional $20 million from Daniel Jones. Of course, the Brian Burns contract kicks in, and he has a $29.75 million cap hit. It's substantial. Andrew Thomas has $20.1 mil, and Dexter Lawrence has $24.1 mil. However, as I said, they can clear a nice chunk of change by restructuring those contracts if they needed to. And obviously, the $20 million for Jones gives them a little bit of luxury space if they want to go in that direction. I think a lot of people believe that they will, and that's where the money will come from. But they can do some restructures. They've really put together some good contracts here. They're on the same timeline, right? So what I like about what the Giants have done and Joe Schoen have done with the contract situation. Dave Gettleman was signing players, but they were like all scattered in length sometimes. Like he had a lot of 3-year deals, but he was doing them every season. Every season he was going out and getting guys for 3-year deals. So it was like, you had guys that were expiring on different timelines, and it didn't allow him to reset. That's why we were stuck, the first 2 years of Joe Shane's tenure. We weren't really able to spend much money. So now you have a lot of these deals, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, Brian Burns, are all matched up essentially on the same timeline. So you can get out of those deals at kind of the same time. A lot of the dead money's front loaded. Dave Gettleman was pushing a lot of that dead money to the back end of the contract. So we were, he was keeping the cap hits lower early on so we could sign more players. But then the money was catching up to us. He was creating void years, and we were still paying like Golden Tate and like Leonard Williams are still paying. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of guaranteed money that was left over from these bad contracts. But Joe Shane does it differently. He front loads, he does longer contracts, but front loads the dead money. That way he can get out of them a little bit sooner. Rather, he can get them out. He can get out of those contracts if they don't age well, like 2-3 years down the line. Like Dexter Lawrence is going to be a great player. Brian Burns is going to be a great player. Andrew Thomas is going to be a great player for the most part. You know that now. But what happens in 2 or 3 years? You know what I mean? Like you want to protect yourself in the future, not necessarily right now when the injury probability is lower for these young guys. So, Anthony, looking at how this cap has been structured, the contracts, I personally think it's a lot healthier. I think that Joe Shane's done a tremendous job changing the course of this team financially. And I do think that long term is going to benefit us, especially if they want to move on from DJ and reset that rookie quarterback window. If that's the choice that they do make, this team is going to have a lot of money to spend. They have a superstar prospect kind of playmaker in Malik Neighbors, some really good talent on defense with Deontay Banks, Tyler Nubin on rookie contracts. So I really like where the Giants are going in terms of the draft picks that they've utilized to reduce costs at some positions. I think you would agree that it makes a lot of sense what they've done financially. It does bode well for the future long term.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Giants have a lot of flexibility in their cap space long term, as you mentioned. And that was my term for the offseason last year. If you remember, Alex, when the Giants were signing those contracts and making those moves, even with the Saquon Barkley franchise tag decision, with Daniel Jones getting signed to the extension that he did, the term that I used to describe all of the deals that were made last year was flexibility. Joe Shane was very careful to have outs in certain contracts or have short-term deals, or certain deals have front-loaded salary cap guarantees so that they could get out of them sooner rather than later. There was so much flexibility baked into nearly every move that the Giants made last offseason, and it's got them now in a pretty healthy cap situation. Unfortunately, they don't have a ton of salary cap space going into this year because they did a lot of spending this offseason and last offseason as well, coming back to bite them just a little bit this year. But they can make more money moves and free more cap space if they want to. You have the Dexter Lawrence contract and the Andrew Thomas contract. Those two deals could still be restructured further than they already have been, and you could free up a whole lot more salary cap space for the upcoming season if you wanted to. But the Giants don't need to do that because even though they might have been tight on salary cap space before Darren Waller retired, they were still cap healthy. They weren't over the salary cap space, and they had already done all their roster construction moves that they needed to make under the salary cap space, or under the salary cap rather, and also they had their rookie deals already signed, their entire rookie draft class under contract already. They were one of the first teams to get that done. So the Giants have been in a good cap space situation pretty much the entire offseason. And then, like you said, looking ahead to some of these deals that they have long term and the outs that they have in them. The Brian Burns deal was a massive 5 years, $150 million. He's getting $30 million per season. He's getting paid a king's ransom, but they can get out of that deal relatively early if they want to as well. I don't think they'll need to, but if they want to, they can. And the main priority here for the Giants is that while they have these flexible deals in place to free up more salary cap space down the line, it allows them to plan ahead the extensions of some of the homegrown talent that they want to keep, like a Kayvon Thibodeau. It's been a really quick 2 years here, Alex. Flash forward, and we are already 2 years done with Kayvon Thibodeau and his development. He's nearing that second contract already. Like, it goes by very quickly. His 2022 rookie season, 2023, now this upcoming season, that's his third year, and he's eligible for extension going into year 4. So it's very quick and easy for these players to have their salaries increase rather significantly. And the Giants making sure that they have certain contracts expiring within the next 2 years opens things up so that if Evan Neal pans out even, or if Kayvon Thibodeau is in line to get a huge deal soon enough, they can actually afford to pay him sooner rather than later. So there are a lot of different moves that the Giants have made in the past couple years, not only to add talent to the roster, but to ensure that they can maintain the talent that they add to the roster and re-sign young players to long-term extensions. And I think that's more important than anything, because there's nothing worse than when you have a star player, a guy that you really like on your team, and you can't afford to keep him, so he leaves in free agency. Maybe you want to reference Xavier McKinney, maybe you want to reference Saquon Barkley, whoever you want to reference as a Giants fan. You never want to see that happen, but long term, I think the Giants have set themselves up in a position where that's not going to happen to them all that frequently. So they've done a really good job at giving themselves the flexibility to sign some of their young players to long-term extensions. So Alex, kind of what are your thoughts on that? The fact that a lot of these deals are expiring around the similar timeline where certain rookie contracts are also expiring, giving them the ability to get younger and pay their homegrown talent rather than their outsourced talent.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is day and night comparison to what the old structure was like and what the Giants are doing now. You need to have flexibility if you want to be a Super Bowl contending team. You need to have the flexibility to add the right pieces at the right time. The Giants have a lot of youth and a lot of experience now locked up on similar timelines. So if they want to restructure contracts, create void years, open up space, and they have these young talents kind of, they have the right structure, as you're kind of referencing there, that if older guys are starting to regress, they have younger guys that can replace them and they can pay them and kind of use that as a cycle. Also, like when you have really good players at key positions, the guys developing behind them and alongside them traditionally do better. Like if you have bad players on bad teams and you draft a good player, it's hard to actually like get better when the guys the guys you're playing with are horrible, because the chemistry's bad, the turnovers frequent, the coaching's usually not great. The Giants have some really, really good players at key positions, and guys developing behind them too and alongside them. So you like to see that. I think guys like John Michael Schmitz will benefit a lot from having guys like John Runyon and Andrew Thomas and a much more situated offensive line. I think that guys like Malik Neighbors will do really well with Slayton and Hyatt and Wandale, like a lot of talent there to work with. In the secondary, like Tyler Nubin should benefit a lot from having like a guy like Deontay Banks, who has tremendous upside. These aren't just bad players; these are really good players. Like Kayvon Thibodeau should benefit from the Brian Burns chemistry and kind of influence. There's a lot of different you could say mentorships developing right now, which I do love a lot. So I do think that this Giants team is definitely doing a lot better in terms of cap management, talent management, timing out the different structures of these contracts. So I think the future is bright in that regard. As always, it comes down to like who's the quarterback, like who's the long-term solution there. Is Daniel Jones going to be able to beat Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl? Like that's really the question. Every team's asking themselves. Not just a Giants question. Can Lamar beat him? Can Josh Allen beat him? Can Russell Wilson beat him? It's not just Daniel Jones. And ultimately, like that, but that's the end all be all. You can build a great team, but Brock Purdy couldn't beat Patrick Mahomes even with a great team. So it's like you have to have a stupid amount of talent and a great system and a great scheme, which is why I want Brian Dable to die or live by the sword and start calling plays, because this is his team. This is him and Joe Shane's team. If he doesn't want to call plays, he's just offloading the blame to somebody else when things fall apart. I think it's time for him to be the guy, call the plays, manage the offense, do what he was here to do, what he was hired to do, try to develop the quarterback situation, and as well, create a much more explosive offensive system that bodes well to our strengths and doesn't lean on weaknesses all the time or injury-prone positions, which is what our strategy has been in the past. I think we're going to see big steps forward in those kind of departments, but this roster building process, it never was going to be like a year or two. It was a 3 or 4 year build from day one. Obviously, we were already coming off like multiple failed attempts at rebuilding this roster. So we were like, we all kind of like, including myself, let's expedite this process. I wish this was faster. But building a great team takes years, like 5-6 years sometimes, until you find the right quarterback. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think that Joe Shane understands that. And I think that John Mara is giving them a pretty long leash. It's when the crazy crap starts to happen, like Wink Martindale's firings and like all this bad energy and juju and narratives, that things start to fall apart. If they can manage that, I think John Mara will give them plenty of time to actually get to where they're trying to go. And I think the process has been pretty good so far. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, and I think you make a good point there about John Mara maybe having patience with them if they're able to keep things optically okay, right? Like if there aren't more moments like the Martindale saga, as you mentioned, where Dable's having outbursts with some of his coaches, or if there are no more rumors of the locker room being lost. I think that that's been the trend and the theme with the Giants and their recent firings. John Mara has made these firings once the locker room was lost. Once the head coach didn't have the support of his players anymore. But that never happened last year. The players still supported Brian Dable publicly and seemingly on the sidelines as well and inside the building. It seemed like the hope was never lost, and like Brian Dable had everybody bought in throughout the season. And I think if he's able to keep that going, he can keep his job. But, it is a wins-based job that he's playing. If his team isn't producing wins, well, he'll lose the locker room because of that, and he will lose the confidence of John Mara. So, we'll see how Brian Dable responds this upcoming season. Big year for him. But at least the Giants, they do have some really favorable contracts for themselves right now, and they do have some salary cap space. So if they want to add any more talent going into the season, they could still do that. And if they do so, maybe they'll pick up a few more wins, and Brian Dable and Joe Schoen will keep their job a little bit longer, leading into 2025, where they can hopefully land the quarterback of their dreams if they so choose, once they're able to get out of the Daniel Jones contract if they want to and free up a ton of salary cap space. But this season rests on the shoulders of Brian Dable and Daniel Jones. We'll see how they perform this upcoming season and if they have to make any changes at the QB spot throughout the year or into next year. But right now, the Giants are in a very healthy salary cap space, and we'll see how that continues to progress and what roster building moves that could open up for them. Brandon Ayuk reportedly wants out of San Francisco. We talked a lot about him earlier this offseason. I don't still think that he's an option for the Giants. I don't think that they could trade for him right now, but technically, they do have the salary cap space to afford it if they really wanted to, with $11 million if they backloaded that deal. However, I don't see the Giants making any more splash moves with this money. In fact, I think that they'd be wise to roll it into the 2025 offseason and free up more money for themselves long term. But I think that pretty much breaks down the salary cap space on the New York Giants and where they're at. Like we said, it's healthy right now. But it's also got room for improvement, and if they perform well this season and go into the 2025 offseason, make some more moves, maybe they can build up this roster even more and take advantage of the healthy salary cap space that they have. But that pretty much wraps up this discussion. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, comment on your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.